What's going on, everybody? Really excited for this one. A conversation with my two favorite surfers in the world. Believe it or not, my two favorite surfers in the world are going to be on with me here in just a second. You probably know them as Joe Perot, who you commonly see over at Sports Cards Live with Jeremy Lee, and then Dylan, Double D Vintage Baseball Cards. I think that we set up this little chat group, this text group, and I started texting with these guys, and those two hit it off so fast. It was like in Step Brothers, where they look at each other and they go, "Did we just become best friends?" Yep, it felt like that in the chat. So two guys that are already getting along fantastically. So, and I love them both myself. So let me bring them on. First, we got Joe and we got Dylan. What's going on, guys?
Stoked, man. I'm super stoked to be here. Joe, really excited. I love that, Greg, you put us together on the same episode, and I had reached out to Joe. He'll comment on my comments once in a while or on my videos, and I try and chat with him, but he never replies after the fact. So then you hit us up and put us in a chat together, and it was like, so,
yeah.
Oh, I'm stoked. I really appreciate this, Greg and Joe. It's a pleasure to meet another surfer collector, which you're the first one I've actually talked to face to face. I have a couple commenters that are surfers, but you're a real surfer. And as I was watching your channel, my wife was watching you with Jeremy Lee. My wife, I remember I text in the chat. I go, "Are you a surfer, Joe?" Because my wife goes, he looks like a surfer. So I asked you, and you were. I asked you too, Greg, at one time. So anyways, long story short, thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've appreciated both of your guys' YouTube channel, and thanks to Jay Lee and Sports Cards Live, I've had a little more capacity to generate inroads in the hobby community, and meeting people and meeting you guys has been at the top of the list. Dylan, I don't know if I am allowed to call myself a surfer. I'm a dude who surfs. But I think you're a surfer because from what I understand, you've been at it a long time, and just seeing a few of your boards, I know you're a real one. I'm just a longboarder, so I do what I can out there.
Well, to make it fair, Joe, longboarders are surfers too, and a surfer to me is someone who spends time surfing every week. If you're surfing twice a week, to me, you're a surfer. I don't know. I haven't asked you how much you surf, but I surf every single day, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times a day. But that's how I kind of break it down. But yeah, awesome. I am a real surfer.
And as they say, the best surfer is the one having the most fun. And at least I have a lot of fun out there for sure.
Good.
So you two guys obviously have a lot in common, surfing being part of it. We'll get into that a little bit more as we get going. A lot in common, and then a few things that are a little bit different, which we'll also get into. So I'm going to start with a couple of things that you guys have in common. Both of you have been two of the more continuous collectors of any collectors in the community. A lot of people take these 20, 30-year breaks. And I'm sure that, you guys probably had, a year, 2 years, 3 years, something like that. But you guys have been pretty continuous. So first, Joe, I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the reason that while a lot of people fell away from the hobby, that you've just always still kind of been involved?
Yeah, it's a deep question there, Greg. And thanks for asking it. I think it's a connection to home, and there's a famous line: "Home is where the heart is," not necessarily, where you lay your hat all the time. And I grew up moving in a lot of different places. Had an existence growing up where we probably moved every other year my whole childhood. But the cards were something consistent that I could go to and return to. And even, moving, out of high school into college, it was similar. Every time I went home to sort of visit my mom wherever she was living at one point. She stayed in the Bay Area for a while, but then she moved up to Washington. And I always had my cards with my mom for many, many years. And so it was just a kind of sustained, I don't know, ritual almost of rediscovering your cards and going back to them. And I think I never left because it meant so much to me and my own sense of self and my own kind of identification with that as being a part of me.
Yeah. How about Dylan? Does that a lot of that relate to you too? Or do you think you stayed in it for different reasons? Or what's your take?
Yeah, I think what Joe speaks of, first, I didn't know that Joe never got out. I hadn't heard that yet. So I love that because there's not a lot of us. And the reasons I stayed in, and I think when I really look back on it, is I never hid the fact that I was a baseball card collector. Everyone in my high school knew I was a baseball card collector. Everyone in elementary school, everyone I grew up with, every single person I ever met at some point finds out that I collect baseball cards. I was always open about it. My wife didn't really know the extent of my collection, but she knew I collected. But it wasn't, I've had displays literally in our pantry, in our hallways, all kinds of places. But she didn't know until I till I started building, till we moved over to Hawaii 8 years ago, where I actually was able to display a lot more cards, where she realized it was a lot bigger than, she's seen all my 5,000 count boxes, but I just had giant safes with stacks of cards, graded cards in them. To me, that's why I never got out. I think because I never hid it. I was never like a closet collector. I did it by myself, and I had friends along the way that I interacted with cards with. Some of my best friends were like, I guess, quote unquote nerds. Like I played with Legos till I was probably 13, 14 years old. I still have Legos that I played with, that I built. They're on my wall behind me. That stuff brings me joy. Cards were the same way. It was like an adult. It was like me being an adult, bringing my childhood with me all the way through the years, like Joe said. And it's always just this place that I can go back to and sit on the floor and bring out all my cards. So I think really when it comes down to me never getting out, I never got out. There wasn't years where I didn't buy cards, not a single year in my whole life. There's years where I go nuts and there's years where I didn't go nuts, but I always had an eBay store. I was always selling and buying cards. And I think it was just because I never tucked it away. I never hid it from view of my life. So that's kind of how it is. And it's always just a happy place. I love it. That's how I'd go with it.
Yeah, it definitely, I think I identify a lot with what Joe was saying about how it's part of my identity. And even though there were times I wasn't actively buying, I was always actively looking and following. So I never stopped looking. When I was always checking on certain cards, and kind of, they were sort of my barometer for what is the market doing. And I was always kind of tracking that. And it was just, it's part of what I am. It's not the kind of thing where, you go to a social gathering and they say, what did you go to Cleveland for? And I'm like, a baseball card convention. Like, that doesn't get you cool points at all. And it certainly is not the line I used on my wife on our first date of why she should, hang out with me more often. But it's okay to be kind of nerdy into this kind of stuff. Now, you guys have another thing you guys both have in common is you both collect vintage, but you also collect modern. And there's a lot of modern collectors who just don't understand vintage. There's a lot of vintage collectors who don't understand modern. And so you guys sent me over some pictures, and I picked a handful. I didn't pick all of the ones you guys sent, but I picked a handful that kind of demonstrate how you guys collect. And so I want to first start with Joe's vintage collecting and his cards from his vintage collection. So I'm going to share our screen. So if you're listening in at home, I'll be describing what's on the screen. If you're watching, obviously you could see some stuff. Again, if you look up by Joe riding that wave there, you can see Sports Cards Live is the logo next to him, because though Joe doesn't have an active channel, Joe is regularly on Sports Cards Live with Jeremy Lee, who is pretty much the best in the business at live streams and talk podcasts with cards. And Joe is not on every episode, but pretty darn close. So if you recognize him, that's probably where you've seen him. So check them out. Saturday nights is when they do their lives. So I'll put a link to the channel down below in the description. But let's take a look at first some of Joe's collection and his vintage collection first. So the first card we're going to take a look at here is your 1909 Sweet Caps. This is a T206 Ty Cobb portrait with the green background, which is the more expensive of them. And when you look at this card, the front is absolutely beautiful, great registration, great centering, and then there's some back damage. So tell us why you think, Joe, this card kind of is a card that illustrates how you collect.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of the somewhat newly coined term from Dan's vintage PC of own appeal. And I think I probably got this card, I want to say in maybe around 2012, 2013 maybe. It was in a BVG slab. Actually, I did cross it over just recently. I thought it'd look better in an SGC slab. But yeah, even back then, I mean, Ty Cobb T206, it's a high-end card, and it was very unusual for me to pay anywhere over, I think, 350, 400 was usually my delta back in those days, surviving on a teacher's salary and all that. And so it was really just like, wow, I get the front appeal of the Cobb in all its glory. And I put up with a little bit of paper loss. But even as I say put up with, you can see the stamp print there. There's something a little cool about that to me. I mean, it's clearly the kind of font that looks antique-ish to me. So, would I rather have a clean back? Sure, I would. But there's some character to the reverse, and I get to get into a card that otherwise probably, I mean, even a clean one back then, 10, 15 years ago would have run me, significantly more to get this kind of eye appeal. So it's got eye appeal depending on how you feel about the reverse, but even more so, it's got own appeal. That I could get in and have this in my collection.
And let me throw this in there. I was texting with Dan. I'm in a few different text groups, and one of them I am in with Dan of Dan's Vintage Baseball PC, and he said, I said, yeah, I'm about to go do a conversation with Joe Perot and Dylan, and he goes, be sure to tell them both that I love both of them very much, and I'd love to hang out with both of them. And I didn't let him know that you guys, neither one of you will be at the National, which we could talk about later. But Dan loves you both very much. So I've done my conversation piece there. Let's take a look at this next one, which is a 33 Sport Kings, Jim Thorp. And Jim Thorp is represented as a football player in this one, even though he did multiple things. Tell us a little bit about this particular card. And it's in a one holder, which I'm not sure how, but what's your thoughts on this?
First of all, I love all Sport Kings. I'm even starting to look at people I have no idea who they are, never heard of them, but just the way that the cards are designed, their color, it just speaks to me in 1933. And of course, there are some pretty big names in there. I think you could make the argument that Jim Thorp is one of the biggest names, not because he's more well-known than Babe Ruth or Ty Cobb, but because he really has very few vintage. He's got a lot of vintage issues, but very few that have this kind of eye appeal, or at least to me, a colorful card. And, it sort of obviously he's historically significant as an American Indian, and has that sort of Bo Jackson like two sportness to him, having been a track and field athlete as well as a professional football player, and he played some professional baseball as well. So aside from that, just looking at the card, look at that. I mean, how is that a 1? I did not grade it. I believe I actually bought that off eBay and had it sent directly to the vault in Oregon to avoid a little sales tax, and they agreed with my own assessment that it was above average in its eye appeal for the grade, and I love it. I'm kind of waiting to bring it in hand, but it's the kind of card actually that I want as many of these as I can. And there's only a few cards I feel that way about. This is one of them. I have 2 and I'm working on a 3rd. So just love the issue.
All right. So Dylan, I want to go back to the Cobb and then look at the Thorp, and I want to loop you in on this. So
Yes.
You see this Cobb right here. And Dylan, I mean, we all have different ways that we collect. I have certain things I look for. You have certain things you look for. Now, tell me, when you see this card, what are your thoughts on this Ty Cobb green portrait? Like,
I mean,
are you okay with the back and the stamp and the paper? Like, what is your thought? You're not saying anything. Just what does Dylan's eyes say?
I'll be honest with everything. I'm an open book. When we're talking about cards, I feel it's like one of those things that I feel like we're allowed to be direct in our assessment of cards, because we're not talking about the person buying the card. We're not talking about anything but the card itself. And to me, when I look at this card, I mean, Joe, I love it. I genuinely, I'm not just saying that. Like, if I would I buy that card today, I probably wouldn't buy that card right now. But my opinions on these cards, these older pre-war cards, as you'll see an example, I have paper loss on the back of my cards now and the front. I'm turning a corner, and I'm really starting to realize, like, if I want these cards, as much as I love the fact that I want one that looks like your Jim Thorp, like that thing is like a 10, it looks like a 10. That's, of course, it's what we're all shooting for. But the price, my buddy Adam, Vintage Sanctuary, said it's like a price to I appeal to price ratio or something. I thought was very well. Like, there's something to be said. The price gap on these bigger cards, when you start getting into the condition, is ginormous. And with the eye appeal, if you were to find a one that looked like the Jim Thorp, it's going to cost you $15,000. And I don't know what this one goes for. Let's just say it goes for $6,000 now. I'm going to save that money and I'll buy this example, because that $6,000, that 11 grand, whatever, how much money I'm going to save is astronomically a big deal. And I could buy more cards with that. But I want the card to present well on the front. And I think you nailed it with this, Joe. I know you bought this decades ago, so you might even have different opinions with the cards you're buying now compared to the cards you're buying then. And I think that's the case. But I'm realizing the eye appeal thing is really taking off the last year. And for the bigger cards, especially the pre-war ones, tops, you can still squeak in there and not pay a giant premium. But because they're attainable, but with these older ones, to get those ones that look like the Matty C version of, a perfect example that just like your Jim Thorpe, you're going to pay so much money that it kind of just disturbs the whole purpose of my collecting. And I don't have big cards like that. So I love it. And then if you go to the Jim Thorpe, it's kind of one of those things like that. That's an incredible example. It looks like a PSA, 5. The front is perfect. The back is perfect. I don't know what's wrong with it. There's probably a pinhole. I'm guessing if it's a 1 that you can't see. Obviously, we're all shooting for that. It's obvious. but the price to, the ratio you're going to pay for a card like this now in my brain makes me go for those other cards now. And I want those iconic cards. But for tops, it's different. But for these ones, I'm shooting for anything that has good visual appeal. So
see, and so I put you on the spot, Dylan, and I did it because I was hoping you would say exactly what you just said. Because what you just said was, I understand why somebody would like that card, but the Cobb isn't really for me. But I understand why it's for someone else. But I also understand if I want to get that card someday, I'm starting to have to change my opinion a little bit. And that like hits a trap door to a whole new rabbit hole, the whole changing my opinion thing, because a lot of us get very focused on how we're doing things. We get very dogmatic of no. It's, right now, Dylan, you're all about centering. And a few years ago, you were all about high grade and sharp. And it's a massive shift. And you completely changed your collection, but also at the same time, I see that card. I would love to have this card in my collection. I would love to have this card in my collection. I would love to have both cards in my collection. And I totally hear what you're saying, and I totally see the appeal in both of them. And as I pull up the third card from Joe's vintage collection that we're going to look at, which, by the way, I got to point out, Joe, it's really fun to have seen you for all this time and get to now see some of your collection. This is really fun for me because it gives us a little bit of a taste of, sort of how you do things. And I haven't seen much of your collection before the last few days. You've sent me some pictures over the last few weeks, but what's your response to what Dylan said as I pull up your third card, which is your Hank Aaron rookie?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always evolving, and I would never tell anyone, necessarily like what their aesthetic should be or what they would prioritize. But I think if I was hearing what Dylan was saying, there's probably some low grade cards that are a little more mangled and give you a price point. And then there's other low grade cards that are now with this, renaissance of eye appeal, starting to actually not be quite. I mean, it's the card I'm guessing that Dylan would want if he was gonna venture into that water. But those now, the ratio, as he was saying, is starting to kind of catch up. Just because it's a one doesn't mean it's going to be cheap. And Greg, you've done a lot of great research on that on your channel, assessing some of these lower or even mid-grade 50s and 60s issues where you're just looking at the price point and you're going, I can't believe you can get that card or a card of this quality. But that is changing, and people are, heeding the call of what their eyes tell them, which is, this is a flipping beautiful card.
Yeah. And looking at the screen right now, we've got Joe's 54 Topps Hank Aaron. And one of the reasons that I think that you guys are a perfect match for this conversation is because while you have a lot of similarities, I mean, all three of us grew up in California, the eye appeal thing, a lot of this sort of stuff. But I like that Dylan collects, and we'll look at some of Dylan's cards in a minute. Dylan collects much differently than you, Joe. And I can see where both of you are coming from with how you collect. I mean, I look at this Aaron, and it's like it's sort of like Chris from Missouri is a guy where he wants to have an example of a bunch of different cards. And sort of like what that assessment that you were just talking about, Dylan, is it takes you from this view of, do I want to have an amazing example of this one, or would I rather have these other three cards have an example that might have a couple of issues, but if they're issues I'm okay with, like you referenced Dan's been talking about and other people have been talking about, then the payoff is sometimes worth it. And this, I think there's a lot of good stuff going on with this Hank Aaron rookie. There's a couple of things you could look at and go, for me, or for one owner of the card, they'd go, I can't deal with this, but if that's the whole own appeal thing, right? is if it works for you and you have a freaking Hank Aaron rookie card that's like wonderfully centered. You know, it's got really good color. It's got a really good image of his face. His hat is just popping off the orange. And it's an awesome card. But then
hold on, don't move past the Hank.
We're gonna go for 4 hours at this point. Go ahead.
My Hank Aaron,
Dylan.
I had it. We should have posted them together. Mine looks like exactly like yours. I would imagine there's no creases or wrinkles in that way. The corners, you know, maybe up in the corner or something, but my 2 looks like yours, and it's soft around the edges, but the image is good. The color is good. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's beautiful. I don't think anyone could say that's not. So I'll argue that.
Yeah. And then we look at his next card that I pulled for him, and it's a super nice looking 53 tops Willie Mays. It's got really nice corners. It's got solid centering. I mean, it's a really nice 3. And so tell me, when you look at this card, Joe, when you saw this card up for auction or wherever you saw it, where are you, what is going through your mind? You're assessing this and going, okay, it's got this and it's got this, but the reason I think this is the one for me is because of what?
I've always, you know, you try to distinguish why the grade is what the grade is. And, you know, you can see on the back, there's some wax staining. And to me, I understand the magnitude that impacts the technical grade. In fact, even a 3, I mean, if it was PSA, it'd probably be a 2, because that residue there, you know, technically is a significant issue. But I looked at the card. I always worry with the 53s about coloring, you know, with the black, and also trimming potentially, because it's a bigger card, and so trimmers historically have been able to, you know, potentially get away with things. But everything looked balanced enough to my eye, and I trust SGC. And you know, I think it looks awesome in the black tuxedo there, with you know, the way the features of the card. Or so it was really just looking again for where's the value of something that on the front side looks like a 5, and getting in at the price of a little bit of wax staining, which again is part of the card's journey, right? It's part of the card's history. It may very well have come out of the pack that way.
Yeah. Now, I want to follow up on this, because what you just said, I think, is super important for people listening. If we go back through the 4 cards that we've seen so far, we've got a really nice looking Ty Cobb in a 1. To me, that card, the eye appeal of that card is way above a 1 for me, way above a 1. The Thorp, obviously, I think the Thorp looks like a 4 or a 5. Then you got the Hank Aaron, that all the things I need a card to have, it has all of that. And to me, it looks way better than the 1. And then this Willie Mays looks way better than a 3. So what you said a second ago, and I wrote it down, you said, where is the value? And I think the value move, and I think a lot of people are getting to this point, is when you see a 3 on a card that looks more like a 5 to me, like this looks like a 5 to me, I say, this is an opportunity for me to get a card that I otherwise couldn't afford, because if it had a 5 on it, it would be out of my price range. But this is a 5 that's disguised as a 3 because of how the technical grade fell, or because of how that grader had a bad night the night before or something. And so to me, what you're doing is you're buying opportunities that are presenting themselves of cards that are undergraded. And about 2 years ago, I did a video and I said, cards that are undergraded I was basically saying this, and somebody in the comments said, you're an idiot, because someday you're going to end up with a bunch of cards that aren't worth as much as they should be, because if you try to sell them, you won't be able to sell them for enough because the numbers are low. You should be buying high numbers. And I was just like, bro, like, no, like, I want to have nice cards. And I think that we're getting away. Dylan, are we moving away finally from the number being the number one thing when people are buying cards? Are we at the point finally where people are actually looking at the quality of the card when actually deciding what they're willing to pay for it?
100%. Like 3 years ago when I decided to sell my high grade stuff and buy center tops cards, like
Yeah.
I questioned my own self and I pushed it freaking hard. But I take a little different stance than what you guys did when you guys kind of look, when you assess your cards and the number on it. You kind of look at that and you say, Greg, you've always said, like, I look at a 3 and I go, well, it looks like a 5. That's never crossed my brain. I've never bought a card and said, this 3 looks like a 7. That's why I'm buying the card. No, my tops, I'm so particular. It's all based on centering. I've never bought a card and said, this 4 should be a 7. I just bought it because it looked beautiful all around. I never actually thought it should get a higher grade, but I have kind of rethought that thought because of watching your channel and seeing people turning cards and things coming back higher grades. And so I started looking at my cards a little differently and being like, I did really well. I'm realizing like these cards are supposed to be higher grades. So, but I never thought that, and I still don't really buy cards based off of that. So just had to throw that in there.
Yeah, let me just say, so what my dad does is my dad could buy whatever he wants. And by the way, if you're watching on the TV or on the screen, you see Joe's beautiful 49 leaf Joe DiMaggio, which is just sitting there staring at us, which again, that card looks way better than a 2.5 to me. But what my dad has always done is he looks for openings in the market and opportunities in the card market, because his favorite part of cards, I think, is actually finding ways to make money from cards to then use that money to get free cards. So he literally, my dad has like 0 of his own dollars ever invested in cards. Everything in his collection is from stuff he made from cards. And the number one thing that he's doing when we go to shows is he's looking for freshly graded PSA cards that look like they are undergraded, like a 61 Topps Carl Yastrzemski he bought not that long ago for like, it was a 4. So he bought it for like $45. He cracked it because it was not a 4, sent it to SGC. It got a 7. Oh. And then he sold it for like $360. So he made $300 just by going, PSA blew it on that one, and I'm going to go make money. So he will literally buy cards and go, oh, I'm just cracking these, sending these to SGC, and then I'm going to sell them because this is an opportunity. For anybody listening, if you have a good eye, like my dad's been doing this for 35 years, he has a good enough eye that he knows what, it all should be. So Joe, what's your response to that? But also tell us about the DiMaggio on the screen, which again, I think is an opportunity because that card to me looks like a 3.5 or a 4. Yeah.
Well, first of all, you're giving away your dad's trade secrets. So I'm not sure he's going to be so happy with you about that. But yeah, I mean, and you actually did a drop recently where you talked about how you can access the cert number on the website if the picture isn't so great in the scan if you're buying from afar. But certainly when you're at a show or you're in person, being able to really kind of use your own eye. All of us have been in the hobby a long time, not as long as your dad, but long enough where I think I trust my capacity to say, yeah, that might have a chance. This card is actually a case in point. I recently crossed this over from an old BVG slab that I'd had for many, many years. It was in a 2. And I didn't crack it thinking or hoping even that it was going to get a higher grade. It's just I've found that not all, but some of my BVG slabs, they're so old that the cert numbers are no longer valid because there was a fire at Beckett or a data loss. They lost all their things. I talked to Dr. Beckett about it once, and he explained it all to me. So for that reason, as well as I just thought a DiMaggio in this this color would look better in an SGC. And happy I did, because I got the 0.5 grade bump as well, which shows that BVG was, at least in some moments, fairly stringent in their assessments, especially early on. If you come across old BVG slabs, depending on what component of the card is having issues, you can find some crossover opportunity there for arbitrage. But yeah, this DiMaggio, I mean, just a seminal set there, the 48-49 Leaf. I've had a few different cards there. They're probably the two biggest cards that I would like to own that I don't own are from that set, and I've never owned either. That'd be the Dobie and the Page. And the Dobie could be within reach, but the Page is pretty much out of reach at this point financially.
Yeah.
But hey, Jolton Joe DiMaggio, there's a lot of lore there. I don't have to tell you as a Yankee fan, 56 game hitting streak, all that jazz. So he's iconic in my mind. And this is one of his nicer cards. I don't know if it's his nicest, but it's one of his nicer cards.
So let me throw one thing in, because that just triggered something I felt like I should share. We look at cert numbers, and your story about Beckett, I think is interesting. I hadn't heard that. But one of the things that reminded me of is, when these companies started grading, Beckett, SGC, and PSA, there were not databases that were synced where you could be doing something here and it would populate here. Like the internet was, and databases on the internet were not at that point. And that's one of the reasons why people have to be careful with PSA certs, is because you'll see a number and you'll go, oh, it's not a leading 0 on the serial number. So, or it's not a 1 or a 2. Oh, look, it's a 6 or it's a 4 or something. And what they would do is, when they were grading on site, because they weren't electronically synced, is they would say, start with, 4200 and number from there. And so what happened is, there are some cards in the system now for PSA where, because they couldn't use the actual serial number, that they're not sequential. And
Right.
So sometimes you'll see these serial numbers and go, this was probably only graded 3 years ago, because it got a new slab. So it's got the lighthouse, it's got all the stuff, and it's got this higher number. But that's not necessarily the case. So you can't rely that it was done recently. You have to always remember that might have happened.
Well,
Dylan,
let me.
yeah.
I gotta say something here, because your dad's a legend, first and foremost. His latest pickup 62s, every one of those cards, they go, oh yeah, those are high graded cards. Here's the difference between how I collect versus how your dad collects and how you collect, Greg, in particular. When I go after my cards in a PSA 4, I don't care if it was graded, the first ever card graded, or it was graded yesterday. I also don't care if that 4 that I choose is going to grade a 7 in the future or a 2 in the future. When I buy that 4, I'm buying that 4 because I think that card itself is absolutely beautiful. I don't buy the card because I think it's going to grade higher, or I'm not trying to make arbitrage. I'm not going to crack it out and try and get a higher grade. I buy it simply because I think it's a beautiful looking card, and I don't care if it deserves the 4 or it deserves a 10. That never crosses my brain. I don't care. It's irrelevant. And I love that the future is going to reward me because of that. And because guys like Matty C and the new website coming out and these PWCC stickers or the Mike Baker stickers, that is like rewarding that aspect, where your dad still has to physically crack the card out, send it to another company. I don't feel like I'm going to have to do that in the future.
Okay, so I gotta let me just respond. I totally what you're saying in a really diplomatic and well-spoken way is, buy the card, not the grade. That's what you're saying, and I agree with that. But I look at the grade, I look at the serial number, I look at the grading company. All of those things are clues. They're adjectives about the card. So just because it's a new serial number doesn't automatically mean it's graded harder. Just because, it's a PSA versus an SGC doesn't automatically, just because it's a 7 instead of a 4 doesn't automatically. But if I'm sitting at the park, and here comes an analogy, and I've got to pick my basketball team of 10 dudes I've never seen before, and I have first pick, I'm probably going to pick the guy over there who's 6'9", not the guy who's 5'2". Now, that's not to say that the guy who's 5'2" isn't the best player on the court, but based on prior knowledge and experience, I go, things tend to mean this. So I'm a little bit leaning that way from the beginning, right? I lean toward that 6'9" guy over there is probably going to be a valuable asset on the court. I lean towards a newer PSA slab being graded harder than a PSA slab with a long barcode. It's not across the board. It's not across the board, but it's a clue. Joe, weigh in, and then we'll go back to you, Dylan.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense to me. And I, and I also appreciate what Dylan's saying is like, I just look at the card. Like I just, keeping it simple, kind of like, beginner mind, fresh mind, Zen mind, let's not overcomplicate things. What does the card look like? But, I do sell cards, and more so, I mean, when you buy as long as I have, you clear out the collection a bit, and your tastes maybe change. Like for instance, there's a story behind that Hank Aaron card that maybe I'll tell in a little bit, but you upgrade or you adjust for your mistakes, and or you want to consolidate or resource for something else. So I do, like you, Greg, I can't help myself but think about, is there arbitrage? Am I getting value here? Maybe it's a teacher thing. Maybe teachers have to always be kind of
we're broke.
Yeah, you got to like think about our approach here and our portfolio, if you will. But anyway, that's
100%.
Go for it, Dylan.
That's exactly what I'm trying to hit the nail on the head right there. The way, at least Greg, because I know a lot more about Greg's collecting and his mindset. He likes to have all this data and all this information and dive deep. I don't do that. I'm like experienced, just like I'll make my mistakes on my own and I'll do my things, and I'll learn from people, of course, watching their mistakes and try not to do my own in life. But I literally am just like a hands-on guy. I don't care about the data. I don't care about all this stuff, this noise. I like it. I enjoy the content. I soak it in my brain. But in the end, I don't care if it's a new serial number. I don't care if it's an old serial number. I don't care if it's a BVG slab. You proved it right here. It doesn't matter. There's definitely a principle. Like, yes, I believe PSA grades harder now, but I don't give a crap. I'll buy an old PSA slab. I'll buy a new one. I don't care. So, all right.
I'm gonna throw one last thing in, and then we're gonna take a look at Dylan's vintage cards. And man, we're going long, but I'm having so much fun. This is sick. I love your candor, Dylan. So there's two types of people in this world. I've got 2 daughters, and they are completely different on this. So Molly is signing up for college classes. So what Molly is doing is she's asking people, have you had these teachers before? She's looking online and she's seeing what are the reviews for these different professors. And she's, analyzing what she should do for this class. And should she take this teacher for this class? And at this time, well, I'm going to be here. I got to travel in. Well, if I have a test that day and it's math, it's there. And then Lucy just goes, I need a class at 9, check. I need a class at 11, check. And she's just rolls with it. But Molly is like, she goes into every test and she's got every chart laid out. She's like, and you're like Lucy, Dylan, which I love Lucy and I love you. I'm more like Molly, where I like to have all of my things checked. I dot all my I's, I cross all my T's. And to me, part of the fun is doing that. It's going in and being really well prepared. I mean, look at the way I'm doing this presentation. Like some people would just go click and start. But I have things laid out and organized in a way because that's just how I am. And I think it probably goes back to Joe's comment about, being a teacher. I can't get away with not being prepared. I have to be prepared. So one card, the first card you sent over, Dylan, when I said send some cards that represent how you collect, tell us about your 52, your gorgeous 52 Bowman Mickey Mantle in an SGC 2.5. Why do I have to say the grade? Because it's a description that helps people that are listening, not watching, get an idea of what it might look like. Just like a radio guy explaining what direction the football team is going on the screen. So just forgive me for saying the number, but that's the reason I share it, is it's just an adjective. So tell us about this card. Why'd you pick this one?
Okay, well, I didn't have any direction. No direction was given what cards to send you in this text. I just thought in my own head, hey, I'm going to send you some cards that represent how I collect, what players I collect, what direction my collection is going, things like that. So this 52 Mantle is a card I never thought I'd ever have in my life. It wasn't on my radar. I traded a bunch of cards for this at my first national in 2023. And I literally, I had a stack of cards. I think it was 16 cards. And I comped them out before I went there and had the prices written on the back. He literally took my prices. He said, yeah, I'll trade you. Just what are they worth? I go, I put them on the back. We added up mine. We looked up comps on him on the Mantle, and I gave him an extra $200. And literally we traded comps for comps. I traded a bunch of cards for a little card. And the reason I got this card is obvious. It's just in all the case that he had. The second I went up to every dealer in the whole national, tried to trade my cards. None. No one would bite, especially for the comps, like for what they were worth. And this guy did. And this is the card that popped. And it was like instantly I fell in love with it. It's centered. It's a Mickey Mantle 1952. Who owns a 52 Mickey Mantle? Like, it's a rookie card in my brain, right? Even though it's not. It's a 52 Mantle. That's what I got to say about it. I don't think it deserves more than a 2.5. I don't care. It is a lovely example of a baseball card, and this is what I'm shooting for in my collection. And that was before the eye appeal took over. Now I probably couldn't even afford this card. So that's kind of how it goes.
It's a gorgeous card. And I've heard you tell that story about 3 times, Dylan. And
sure.
Every time, because I know you're a video game guy. As a kid, you were a video game guy like me. Did you have Ken Griffey Jr. baseball?
Well,
I
wasn't a Ken Griffey Jr. baseball guy. I was a Baseball Talk and Baseball Stars and Original Baseball.
Okay, well, after that was Ken Griffey Jr. baseball. Yep. This would have been on the Nintendo 64.
Yeah.
And it was like the first game you could trade. So I would go in and I would try to take like these 3 reserves and trade them for like, Will Clark or something, and you'd try to like take all these little scrub things and then just get this crown jewel. And every time you tell this story, I think about that.
I felt like a kid. I felt like I was taking advantage of the dealer. And I made a point to never go back to that dealer again the whole rest of the show because I thought he was going to ask for the card back.
All right, Joe, let's take a look at this. We've got Dylan's, he pairs stuff. And the other thing about Dylan is when he takes his pictures, I can see Dylan running around, setting things up just right. So there's not the glare and they're just centered right. And taking the picture, he's very artistic about it. I mean, when you look at Dylan's collection and you look at like this picture, 61 Topps Mantle, where he's looking over toward the center, and then the Maris where it's like he's looking over at Mantle. But these 2 cards, when you look at these 2 cards, if all you knew about Dylan was these 2 cards, what do you think about him as a collector? Like what crosses your mind when you see this setup right here?
Strong understanding of baseball knowledge for the particular year in tandem, given what happened in 61, and also aesthetic sensibilities, not just with the amazingly centered nature of the cards, but just how he has them sort of looking at each other and positioned. And I would say the strong saturation of the red and the yellow, which speaks to me, that's what sort of pops and kind of connects the cards in a sort of flip flopped, M&M Brothers kind of way. So I love it.
Now, one of the things that I look at here is, and Dylan, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm just going to make a leap and an assumption here for a second. When I look at a lot of Joe's cards, I think if Joe were to list his cards right now, the ones we've seen, those 5 cards that we looked at, I think they would probably sell for more than the grade number comp. Again,
Absolutely.
The grade number comp. So the ones, would probably sell for more than what the ones normally sell for. I mean, I have to assume, because I know you've picked up both these cards in the last 12 to 18 months, because I remember you buying them and sending pictures and me seeing them and going, man, those are bad. Those are sweet. I mean, is it safe to say that when you're buying cards, again, I know you hate numbers. I get that. Is it safe to say that these cards probably sell for way above the comp for that number? Because there are people out there who will go, oh, a 2 Roger Maris is supposed to sell for, I don't know, $130. Maybe it's $90, whatever it is.
Say, okay, so to answer your question, Greg, that the Roger Maris, it's an incredibly hard card to find centered and nice eye appeal. It's just one of those like unicorn cards. And I spent probably a year looking for this card because I have had many copies of this in my day. But it was before, sevens, before I was looking for centering. When I came across this, the guy wanted $100 for it. I beat him down to like 90. That's probably double what comps go for a 2. But that card is one of those cards that is an arbitrage card. I have no idea why that thing's a freaking 2. The back is flawless. There's no creases. There's no wrinkles in it. I don't understand. I don't know. The guy was smoking crack when he graded that thing, but I paid $90 for it. The Mantle, in my opinion, is the nicest 61 Mantle I've ever seen. There isn't a single piece of photo material that is out of place. It is the most unbelievable example, and I don't remember what I paid for it, probably in the $550 range. I do not look up comps. People think I'm joking or lying. I'll look up comps on big giant cards, but on my Topps cards, I know what Topps cards are worth, and I really could care less. I didn't look up comps when I bought it. I didn't look up comps after I bought it, and I didn't look up comps to this day. I have no idea. But absolutely, if I sold that 61 Mantle today, I would assume if I was selling it at a show, I'd probably ask $1,100 for it. I don't care what the grade is. That's what I would ask. And I wouldn't go a single dime lower. The Maris, probably like $300. I wouldn't sell either because they're unicorns, full-blown unicorns. They're my favorite 2 vintage cards that together in my whole collection, I feel like.
I mean, it's a stunning picture. It's a stunning couple of cards. Let me ask you a quick follow-up question before we go to the next picture. Do you think that people that are comping cards, so a guy goes to the National, he wants a 61 Mantle, he sees this one, he pulls open the comps and it says 700, you think it's worth 1,100. Is that person who's looking up comps at the number, are they wasting their time? Are they wrong? Are they doing the whole hobby wrong? Should they just say, no, that card looks like a 6, so I want to look at the 6 comps? Or should they just go, I feel like it's, what should a person do who's going to the National in a month and is looking for a 61 Mantle and goes, no way am I paying 1,100. That card's highest comp is 750. Tell them why they're wrong.
I'm not going to tell them why they're wrong. They're absolutely not wrong. If you're trying to buy a card, beat that guy to death. But if I'm selling the card, I have all the right in the world to ask whatever I want. And the future is, when I first did this 3 years ago, I thought maybe I'm out of my mind, but I was getting cards for super cheap, right? So I didn't think I was doing anything crazy, meaning I didn't know for sure that these low grade, high eye appeal centered centered is rare in tops. I didn't know these were going to be worth more for sure in the future. I just guessed it. But in the future, even more is brighter and brighter every day that 4 is worth a lot more than what it says. But if you're a buyer, absolutely pull up comps and beat the heck out of it. But you have a right as a seller to be like, no, it doesn't. I don't care what it says. And I don't care if you send that to me. I don't care if I sent that Mantle and I got another 4. I don't care. The 4 means nothing to me. I think a 6 probably is $1,100, but a centered 6, in my opinion, is a $2,000 card. It's one that looks like that. So that's how I would approach it. I think comps are fantastic for people who, in quotes, need comps, newer collectors, or people who really are like John Wade Boggs fan who don't want to quote unquote overpay for a number. I don't give a crap about the number, so I'll overpay or underpay. I don't even know. I don't even know if I'm overpaying or underpaying. That isn't the point of my collection. That isn't how I collect cards. I do talk about how I want my cards to be worth more in the future than they are in the present, or at least what I paid for them. But I also don't care about comps. So I kind of have a 2 thing going against me, right? Because I was banking on the fact that my cards are going to be worth more in the future, even though they're stuck in that number. They're stuck in that grade. But I said, F that number. I don't care. I still think this card's going to be worth more in the future. I still think it's worth more today. That's why I'm buying it. That's how I go about it. Comps are great. Anyone out there, use comps to your advantage, because that's where you're going to take advantage of the seller who maybe isn't going to sell this Mantle for $1,100 like me. I wouldn't even sell this for $1,100. Someone asked me $1,100. I'm not selling it to you. I'm not selling it. But
Joe, let me ask you, when you go to buy a card, because I texted Joe a lot when I was in Strongsville. I was sending him pictures. He was giving me advice on some cards. And here's kind of the formula that I went through. So this is how Greg approaches a show. When I see a card and I go, man, that Chrissy Mathewson 2, it looks to me more like a 3. But it's in the 2 comp range. It's high 2 comp range, but it's in the 2 comp range. That's a steal because I see a card that's a 3 and I can get it in the 2 range. When I bought my Sandy Koufax, it was a 4.5. I'm like, dude, that thing looks like a 6. I can buy it in the range for a 4.5. Like, that's a good buy because I'm getting it in 4.5 prices. So what I try to do is I try to pay in the comp range, but find cards that look better than that particular grade. Joe, what is your process when you're looking for a card right now? You're going to go buy a card and you're going, what do I want to pay for this? I just shared kind of my philosophy. Dylan said he doesn't even know what the comps are. He doesn't even look. What do you do? For people listening, what is the philosophy that you go through?
Well, before we talk about that, I want to talk about what I did before there were, card ladder and various other pricing tools, which was, the days of eBay, the early days of eBay, where you might have access to what was sold in the last, I think they had it up to 60 days and maybe it's more now. There might've been a time when it was just 30 days, but a lot of times, especially in the vintage world, there wouldn't be any sales that would give you anything to go on. So you truly, you had your old baseball card almanac and the Beckett might not have all the standard caramel listings that you need, or red heart, or whatever you're going for. So you really had to use your own barometer of appreciation and worth to you, and or your own kind of vision, both literally and figuratively, your vision on what a card's value amounted to. And I kind of miss those days, to be honest. We're so rigid now with the comp conversation, and I think sometimes that actually slows down the evolution of the hobby. The hobby might move in more dynamic ways if people just let their heart's desires kind of be expressed with like, no, that Mantle's worth, $1,200 in whatever grade. But nowadays, Greg, to get to your question, I am more diligent, usually. Sometimes I'm a little impulsive, but the comp is usually a barometer or a measuring stick, if you will, of sort of where I'm starting with my analysis of the card. It's not the end all. It's a starting point for where I will see, relative to the other copies that are out there in vintage. There is no such thing in my mind as a V, a two. There's a million different kinds of twos.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of two are we talking about? And I'll also, I've become more and more interested in pop counts, not of the grade, but of the overall number of the cards that exist. And that becomes especially relevant in pre-war stuff, because there is some pre-war stuff that is somewhat plentiful, and then there's other pre-war stuff that is much more rare and scarce. You just don't see it. So that brings up, I think, the assessment that I have to include is both a combination of the comps that I can locate, the population that I see, how frequently the card comes up, and whether it's likely you will see something in that general wheelhouse of the grade that you can afford or that you're looking for anytime soon. And in many cases, if you see something and it's attractive to you and you don't pounce, you may very well regret it. So I tend to kind of think about it in those terms. Is this an opportunity I'm going to regret if I don't pounce on it? And in the modern world, that can get me in trouble, but in the vintage world, it rarely gets me in trouble.
Yeah, such a great point. One of the things I teach my students is buying cars. And the first chapter that we do is buying a new car. And it's very simple because there's different dealerships charging different prices for the exact same thing. But when you get to used cars, the next chapter, I'm like, okay, this is a lot more difficult because there are a million different things that could be different between that car and that car that make it almost impossible to compare them. Now, when you talk about pop counts, I think that ties in perfectly to the card, the beautiful card on the screen that Dylan calls his crown jewel of his collection for a good reason. How many 1961 Topps Roger Maris cards are there that are autographed in a ballpoint pen beautifully across the perfect spot for it in a blue ballpoint pen? I mean, it is it's centered. So Dylan, tell us, why do you call this your crown jewel besides the obvious reasons? And when this card came up, per what Joe just said about pop reports and what is the likelihood of seeing another one of these that looks like that, how does that weigh into your decision making about what you're willing to pay?
Yeah, I was so stoked when I saw that and Joe was talking like pop reports because, I was not a pop report guy. I look at them for my Japanese baseball cards now. I didn't when I was buying them, but I know now which ones that don't exist. And when I got into modern, when I started looking at some pop reports, but for this Roger Maris, this card found me. I had sold a 1956 Mickey Mantle and a PSA 8 OC top to bottom. I collected OC top to bottom, 8 OC top to bottoms for 2 decades. I loved them because they were packed fresh. They looked cherry. No one wanted to touch them. And I did them super cheap, and top to bottom centering didn't bother me nearly as much as anything else. And most cards are offset anyway, so I'd hunt those down. I still kept a lot, but I sold it for $5,000. So I had money, and I wanted a big card. And my Roger Maris infatuation is big. It always has been. He's always been one of my favorite players of all time. I love the home run record. That card popped up when I actually, right after I sold that card, and I had the money, and I looked up so what I did with this card, it was on an auction and I found it right away. I had 7 days to kind of research the card, but I did not even do a single thing of research. I told myself, don't research this card. Don't find out what autographs cost for Roger Maris. Don't do any of that. I wanted to come up with a price by myself, in my own brain, what I was willing to spend. And I believe I even talked about this in my video. So correct me if I'm wrong. If you want to go back and watch my video, I said I think I was willing to spend $2,800. And I told myself, do the research the last day when the auction is going to end or the day before. So I did. And because I didn't want it to affect what I was willing to pay. And that's when I looked up the pop reports. And I found out, I think there are 70 or 80 of these cards that exist from PSA that are signed. I think there's 4 that are higher graded, and I think there were 7s. And like I said, I don't care about the grade. And then the autograph placement. All of this included the centering, the eye appeal. There's no print dots. Like, the card itself is one that I would have chose, and to have it autographed. So I came up with a price of $2,800. And the comps, there were no comps that I could find. Like, I don't have VCP. I don't have any of those. So I just have eBay, whatever the max was. I think some of his autographs went for like $1,000, but they all look like crap to me. So I stuck with my original price. I bid $2,800. I won it for $2,300. And I genuinely think this is probably the greatest Roger Maris autograph card in existence in the whole world. And I challenge the four that are higher graded to show me those, because I want to see them, because I don't think they're gonna look better than the one I have. Now that's just me hearsay. That's just me just pretending it's the greatest one. But I when I found this, it just like all the bells and whistles blew in my head, and I just had to have it. And it's my pride and joy in my entire collection. And someone could come along and offer me $5,000 for it tomorrow, cash in a briefcase, and I wouldn't even come close to even thinking it. It wouldn't even cross my mind. $10,000, I might actually contemplate. Is it worth what I paid? Maybe not. Is it worth $1,000? I don't know. I don't care. I'm never gonna see one like this again. That's how I went about it, though.
It's funny that you say that because as we were looking at it and you started talking about it, I was literally saying, this has to be the best Roger Maris card, not just autographed card in the world. Would I rather have his rookie in a 9 or that? Greg, me, would rather have that card than his rookie in a 9. That is more special and meaningful than his rookie in a 9. And like you said, I don't know what the other ones look like, but I can't imagine that they look better than that. And as you were talking, I remember Dylan being super secretive about this one. Like, we're always talking about what we're bidding on and stuff. And you texted me on January 14th. I just pulled it up.
No way.
And you said, I won something big. I mean, my crown jewel in my entire collection. And then you sent me a picture, and my response was, holy crap. And you said, I won it during your live. I've been watching it all week. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, dude. And it's like, I remember that interaction with you. It was like, I have a text where he showed me that for the first time. And yeah, I mean, those memories are part of the coolest thing about the hobby, is how you got it and how it all played out. Like, sharing what you just shared to me is like one of the best things in the hobby. Now,
hold on,
Joe,
real fast, Greg.
Yeah.
Real fast. So the validation, like, because I'm not a comp guy, right? And how are you going to look up comps for something like this? I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to begin. The validation for me to get close to where my number was felt pretty good. Like, I said $2,800 was my peak, and it went at 23, and it feels good when you're validated. I don't know if people are, shield bidding or anything like that. But when your number hits close to where you are as a guy like me who doesn't do comps, you're like, wow, I feel, you feel a little smarter for a moment in time. So I just wanted to mention that. Validation's important in this hobby in your own mind, not sharing, but in your own mind.
Yeah, for sure. And we never really know if we're making good decisions or bad decisions, but when somebody that you respect and other people that you respect say, yeah, dude, that thing is freaking nuts, like that's pretty cool. And that's part of what having a community in the hobby does for you, is it does validate some of the decisions that you're making. Now, Joe, I've seen lots of pictures of your collection, and we haven't really gone, we're just touching the iceberg, but at the tip of the iceberg. But you don't have a ton of vintage autograph stuff. You have some. You don't have a ton. When you're saying that you've been getting more into pop reports and more into rare and stuff, is that a direction that you could see yourself starting to head more? Or is that something, because like we've talked recently, you're like, I want a special card of this player. Like, well, how do you make a card special if there's a lot of them out there? Well, that might be a way to add something to it. And our buddy Tony Liebrick, he is gotten heavy into these because they're low pop and they're special. What do you think your future holds on autographed vintage?
Yeah, that's a good question. But before I answer, I want to just salute Dylan's way of approaching that. Like, and it's something I might borrow, just assessing in your own mind, what would I be willing to pay for this card before you look at any comps, and maybe sitting with it for a little bit and seeing how it lands. Maybe it goes up a little, maybe it comes down a little, and then doing your research might be more informative. I've had IP autos before. I actually had a very mangled 54 Aaron ballpoint, not a very good auto. It was trimmed, just a butchered card. I got rid of that. I've had a couple mazes with autos. I've held on to a couple as well. I think it really has, for me, to be the right mixture of a clean auto and a compelling card. And Dylan's checks those boxes big time. So yeah, I could see it. I had a friend actually who had just a beautiful 58 Clemente signed with just a beautiful ballpoint, blue ballpoint pen. He sold that. He did quite well with that. But it needs to be an aesthetically appealing card. The auto needs to be placed well, and I need to have a fairly strong sense that the auto is not going to fade anytime soon. Those would be the standards. I love them, but I am a little picky about what I'll get into with that, because on the one hand it's incredibly unique, and for that reason compelling. But if it's not your kind of unique, if it's not something that speaks to you either in terms of the particular issue, year, Dylan's, not only is it aesthetically pleasing, it has historical relevance to the point where I really wonder when Roger signed that card and what he thought about as he was signing it, knowing that it was the 61 year that he had the 61 home runs. All of that is, amplifies the card's importance in my mind, and makes it a truly special card.
Now, this next one is hearing Dylan talk about this card always makes me smile, because he gets so fired up about this card, how it's Sadahara O on a king, king of clubs. It's pretty cool. Dylan has also gotten fairly heavy into Japanese cards more recently. Is that the reason that you included this particular one? As it tells part of the story, not just of a card you really like, but also your Japanese part of your collection?
Yeah, my Japanese baseball card collection's up there on my favorite collection that I have. I really have a special place for Sadahara O and Shigeo and a couple other guys that just I think there's just a missing component with those guys in in America, like how they haven't been pushed. But I do know now, you know, Sadaharo he's in packs of Topps cards now. It's pretty exciting. And to me, it's a kind of a double-sided thing. When I pick up cards of these guys, not only do I feel like I'm getting an incredible deal, I feel like the future is very, very bright for guys collecting these cards, not only in America but in Japan as well, because they don't collect much vintage over there. You know, this is me just learning as I go, so I'm no expert in any of this. Tony JP Wisco, I learned from him, and Robert Prestige Auctions. Like, that's where I learned from these guys. But I just wanted to share that this card, because this is a huge portion of my collection. I could literally just buy Japanese cards of these 3 players that I collect for the rest of my life and be a happy man. And when I bought these cards, almost all of my Japanese cards, I never looked up the pop reports. I didn't know. I just started doing that and realizing there's, you know, and I just got the vintage catalog, the Japanese vintage catalog. Like, there's only 5 of these in the world. Like, I think there's only 5 of these according to the catalog. I wrote on the back of each slab on the sleeve. I'm doing a lot of research. I have ones that there's like none. They just don't exist. And I didn't spend a lot of money on these cards, and he has more home runs than anyone in the world. So yeah, that's why I shared it. This card in particular is one of my favorite baseball cards in my entire collection. The story behind it, everything about it. Anyone that comes to my house, I share this card. I tell them about Sadahara O, and I point to this exact card. So it's always on my wall.
I mean, it's an awesome card. And, you know, Robert I spent a lot of time talking to him myself at the National last year. And one of the things you point out that I think is really interesting, and it'll be interesting to see where things go. But he mentioned to me too, that in Japan, they don't collect a lot of vintage, which means a couple of things. It means they don't hold on to stuff. So the supply that's out there, how much is there? Because there's not space coming out of the wazoo over there. So to store stuff. So it's sort of like our friends that live in New York City go, I have to have a small collection because I don't have the space. So a lot of the stuff that was kept is probably gone over there. And because they don't collect a lot of old things, they tend to just get rid of them and then get new things, which, knowing that about the culture and hearing Robert talk about that, means the supply is probably pretty low. But also it could mean that the demand from Japanese collectors may not be as high for vintage as it is for modern. So it's sort of this thing of weighing that of, are these vintage cards, is suddenly, if Japanese people, if the population there start going, I want to get into vintage cards, there aren't a ton, but will they start changing kind of the culture of not hanging on to old things to create that demand? And those sorts of things are what go through my head when I hear Robert say something like, they don't really collect vintage over there. I'm like, well, okay, let me now look 5 years down the road. What does that look like? And that's part of the fun. Now, we're at a crossroads here with our conversation, because my wife had said, how long do you think you'll be? And I said, 45 minutes to an hour. We're in an hour and 19 minutes. I don't know what your guys' schedule is, and I don't want to be generous with your time. So if you guys are available, I'm down to keep going, and we'll have a part 2. If you guys have something going on, then let's pull the ripcord. And this has been a blast, and we'll have to do it again sometime in the future. So you guys be straight blunt with me. Where are you guys at with this?
I'm good.
All right. Okay. I'm having a freaking blast.
Me too.
This has been a fast hour and 20 minutes. Yeah. All right. Oh, I guess there was one more card in there. So, Dylan, these cards, they so sum you up to me. Like, if you were to a picture that sums up Dylan's vintage collecting, it might be this: 2 perfectly centered Hank Aaron 57 Topps cards in a set that is impossible to find centered, But the fact that you have 2 of them is so Dylan, it's insane, because you're like, yeah, anytime I see a perfectly centered Robin Yount rookie card, I'm just going to buy it and add it to the stack because they don't come centered. So you're like, what's better than having one of these? Having 2 of these. So I mean, is this the kind of thing where you'll just keep adding to the pile, or at some point will you go, all right, one of these I'll let it go so I could go get other stuff?
It's always the end game. It's always been my life. I love doubles, triples. I've done that my whole life. And I always told myself I'd sell, some. And I have broke away. I sold lots of Robin Yount rookie cards over the last 3 years that were off-centered. So in the future, absolutely, I'll sell one of these. I bought one of these live from James on a Misfits live, the 2. And the other one I bought, I didn't pay that much for that 5, and it had a E sticker on it. I didn't. This was before I cared about those stickers. I just ripped the thing off. I just thought they were stupid. Now I've kind of changed my tune. I'll freaking slide that thing back on there. But yeah, it's me in a nutshell. That's why I shared these. Just when I find cards that are unicorns, I grab them, and I have a centering scale like. A lot like Matty C. I bring his name up a lot because he's kind of my nemesis. Also a guy that I've looked to for my cards. Like I didn't learn about centering through him. My wife's the one that got me into it. But after that, I saw Matty C posting things, and all the time he'd pick up a card and be like, I was going for that same card. So now when I see cards, I have this centering scale, 1 through 10, 1 being the easiest to find centered, meaning a modern card, and a 10 being the hardest. And I rank every single card that comes into my collection. I rank them on that scale. And this card comes in at an 8. So a 10 being the Ozzie Smith rookie is a 10 because I've never seen a center one. Not even the 10 isn't centered. Clemente rookie is a 9. This is an 8. So when I see cards that are like 8s and I see a centered one, and I see that it's not inflated crazy, I'm buying it. And when you have one that has no snow on it, like 57s or like limited snow, like all that's included, So I had to share those because that's me in a nutshell.
So it's fun because I had some ideas of some topics to cover, and then one of you says something, and I just completely veer off course and take the deer trail down that route. I want to ask something to you, Joe, because I don't want Dylan to completely taint the jury pool, and I want to hear your thoughts on it first, and then I want to go back to Dylan on it.